Okay, it's exactly 1:30, so we can start today's session. Thank you for joining us today physically in Wageningen and also virtually through Zoom. My name is Tatjana Knežević. I'm a project manager at the Bioscience Institute in Serbia, and I will be the moderator of today's session on experiences in fundraising by SMEs. My today's guests are Carl Sarnobat from Green Killer Weeds and Giovanni Bolligno from Dahlia Robotics. They are both winners of previous agROBOfood open calls, and their company successfully obtained funds in previous period, and they will share today with us their experiences regarding fundraising, giving valuable advice for AgTech.
There are now 3 people here in the room. Let's wait for a few more.
Okay.
Then we can start.
Okay, thanks.
We are ready. So if you're ready, we can start.
Okay, great. So as I said, my guests today are Carl Sarnobat from Green Killer Weeds and Giovanni Bolligno from Dahlia Robotics, both winners of previous agROBOfood open calls. Their companies successfully obtained funds in previous period, and they are willing to share today with us their fundraising experiences, giving valuable advices for AgTech SMEs who are looking for funding. Before we start, I would like to mention a couple of things. First, this session will be recorded. Also, I would like to ask all online participants to make sure that their microphones are muted if they're not talking, because we want to hear clearly the person who is actually talking. And also for the heads up, we will have time for Q&A at the end of our session, but also feel free to leave your comments in the Zoom chat window during our discussion, because I will be looking at the chat box and Carl, Giovanni, and I will try to address your comments. So hello, Carl, hello, Giovanni. So Carl, would you please introduce yourself, saying a couple of words about your company?
Yeah, hello, I'm Carl Sarnobat. I am the CEO and the founder of Green Killer Weeds. And our project, ZeroTox Vine, is a robot installed in the front of part of the tractor that the mission is to automate the recognition and the removing of the weeds and pests, not using water, not using chemicals, not using toxins, and try to help our food chain to be more safer, more sustainable, and more clean for us, and to help the environment to recover. Our pain today is the use of herbicides and pesticides, and the use of our technology that we are developing. We will be an alternative of the use of herbicides using our robot. We will try to avoid the use of the herbicides to pesticides to fighting with the weeds and pests, with the effects to losing the yield in our crops, and to try to help to secure a healthy food for the population increase in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Giovanni, would you please introduce your company as well?
Hi, I'm Giovanni Bolligno, one of the co-founders of Dahlia Robotics. Dahlia Robotics is developing an autonomous robot which mechanically removes weeds. In the top left corner of the picture, you can see the technical demonstrator at the end of basically phase 2 of the agROBOfood project. It is basically made of a sort of carrier, which is entirely solar paneled with batteries. powered, and which inside contains, like, 3 weeding modules. Each weeding module basically can host a fast removal tool or a precise removal tool. So it's a completely modular approach. And one of the sort of key advantages is obviously, like, is the fact that it's reduced footprint and size makes it extremely light, less than 150 kilos, which makes it particularly attractive for farmers. Current target crops are sugar beets and salads, although, like, more crops are to be expected to be added further down the road. On the next slide, the AI stack that we use is pixel level AI for the recognition of the crop versus the weeds, RTK GPS, which combines the signal of the pixel level AI for navigation, autonomous navigation purposes, and then within a simulation environment, this is basically tested on the software level prior to be implemented on a hardware level. The system is controlled effectively with a very easy to use mobile interface app, which we developed again, like, and improved in the context of agROBOfood. And of course, like, with all the backend facilities in order to monitor and control remotely the robots.
Thank you very much. Okay, so these are our panelists. Thank you very much for being with us today. And now, before we start the discussion, I would just like to say a couple of words as an introduction to today's topic, and I'll be very brief. First, when we are talking about market trends in agri-food and robotics sectors, it is important to highlight that there are a lot of opportunities on the market in these fields. So according to some research, the global agricultural robotics market size is expected to grow from approximately $5 billion in 2021 to almost $12 billion by 2026. And the most common applications of robotics in agricultural fields include aerial data collection, field mapping, seeding and planting, fertilizing and irrigation, and so on. On the other hand, when it comes to food robotics market, it was valued at $2.1 billion in this year, and it is estimated to reach almost $6 billion by the end of 2031. And in this food industry, the common robotics applications include picking and placing robotics. For example, technologies for picking fruits such as grapes or apples or vegetables like peppers, and also cutting and slicing. And these are primary robotics applications in food industry. And there are also secondary applications such as product decorating and product packaging and palletizing. So there are a lot of market opportunities, and for every business who is doing not only his business in food, agri-food sector, but in every business, fundraising is of great importance. And actually, lack of funding is one of the main reasons why startups fail. However, funding is important not only for startups, but for all SMEs that might be in different development stages. So for example, startups are looking for seed money, which is required to get to the business starting. And more mature companies are looking for funding in order to ensure the cash flow. To meet their day-to-day expenses of a business. And because we know that in the initial period, when a business started its operations, it generates low revenue, and it requires funding, because salaries, bills, insurance, and other things are things that should be paid on time. Also, when a company reaches expansion phase, it needs additional funding to grow new locations, products, or to do additional market research that might be required. Now, we know that funding opportunities come in variety forms. For example, we have public and private funding, equity-free or with equity in the company. It can be aimed to support research or business development and so on. However, the type of the funding chosen depends on the business type and the current situation of a business, as well as on the vision that its business owners have. And no matter which size the business is funding, or if it is about the public or private funding, the funding is never offering an unlimited amount of money. And that's why the modern funding mechanisms have incorporated providing guidance and coaching alongside the funding. Typical examples here are accelerators and incubator programs. Now I have one question for all of you who are listening to us. Please go to Mentimeter and use the code that you see here. And I will just run the Mentimeter now so you can vote. So I would like to hear from you if you have ever raised fundings. And if yes, so what kind of fundings? Okay, we have one unexperienced member. So we have one vote for regional funds, one from national funds. Okay, also accelerators and incubator programs. They're probably public ones. Okay, also someone from received EU grant. What is interesting is that majority of financing, according to European Commission's research, comes from banking sector now when it comes to SMEs, and a minority comes from the capital market sector, which means that Europe is still bank-centric economy. However, as we can see now from the participants here, most of you received national funds, then EU grants, accelerator and incubator programs, regional funds. Okay, there is also one financial support from COSME or INNOFIM programs. Okay. Okay, then we can continue. Thank you. We are also, as you probably know, agROBOfood is also providing financing support to SMEs through its open calls. There are two types of open calls that we are organizing. These are innovation experiments and industrial challenges. And in total, we are going to provide 8 million euros to third parties. And now, very briefly, innovation experiments refer to direct support to digital transformation of agri-food companies that do not have taken full advantage of robotics technologies yet. However, these innovation experiments do not involve any research and development activities, but they focus on innovations that demonstrate the technology's usefulness for end users by showcasing and demonstrating activities. And on the other hand, industrial challenges aim to solve real industry problems and challenges. In the previous open call, we have four challenges defined. And these are the open calls that were organized so far. Currently, the second open call for innovation experiments is open. The total amount to be granted is 2.65 million euros. And the total project amount is around 300 to 500 Ks. And the number of partners which is required per project is 2 to 5 partners, and we will approve approximately six projects. So if you're interested in this open call, please visit our website. Application deadline is 21st of May. So I think that you have enough time to participate and submit your application. Now, agROBOfood beneficiaries who have received funding through our previous open calls share their insights with us on their general experiences with our agROBOfood funding. And well, their main reasons for participation in our project were the following. So open call they applied was perfectly aligned with their company's objectives, and they were satisfied with the amount of funding that was offered, because SMEs usually say that if the amount of funding that is offered is not enough, they don't want to put a lot of time and effort in application. Also, they were interested in networking opportunities. So what we are offering for agROBOfood beneficiaries is to be present in European AgriFood and Robotics ecosystem, and to get recognition and opportunity to create partnerships. Also, the process of applying for our funding was clear and easy for all of our beneficiaries, and the reporting procedure that they have afterwards are not complicated to them. They said that they are always receiving instructions on time, and they don't have any difficulties in reporting their activities. So I hope that this feedback from our agROBOfood beneficiaries will motivate you even more to apply for our open call. And now I will share investors' insights on AgTech landscape that I gathered, and we will see if our panelists have something to add here. So first, AgTech market as a whole is still underinvested, which means that there are a lot of opportunities, as I said at the beginning. And in the center of investment is now regenerative farming and these practices, because innovative solutions and technologies related to regenerative farming are needed now on the market. Also, with the focus on net zero agriculture, there will be a fundamental reallocation of capital towards more climate friendly solutions. And institutional investors are also thinking this way. So that's why we see a lot of investments going in climate-friendly solutions. Also, technology funded by early venture capital investors will probably lead the transformation of food and agriculture. On the other hand, when it comes to robotics market, we see that the market for robot startups attempting direct human labor replacement is overheated. While we are now looking for robots that are assisting human workers, so not replacing the labor, human labor, but assisting it, increasing human productivity, and this market is still underheated. Also, near-term opportunity in robotics is teleoperation, and specifically pairing fully automated robotic operations with occasional human remote operations of individual robots. This is something that is expected to have like a huge boom in the near future. And what I noticed is that robotic companies VCs find most exciting today are addressing some of these areas. So either their high labor turnover and shortage is in the center of their in their challenges that they're trying to solve, or they're aiming to do some new research around generalization on the softer side. So these are some insights that are happening on the market currently. Now, Carlos, what do you think? Do you agree with these investment trends, or would you add something?
Yes, I may agree with these trends, but sometimes the trends on the market to the trends with investors or the grants, for example, must be aligned. Sometimes are very separated in the path and not meet the same target to help the startups or SMEs to find the need funds to go ahead with the development of the technology. And sometimes it's very difficult to try to meet with the investors and to be aligned with the investors' interests and to the trends in the market.
Mm-hmm. And would you add something else? So what investors are interested to see now?
Sorry?
What investors are interested to see in the agricultural robotics? So what kind of robots are now needed on the market?
I think that the investment are more focused on investment related to vertical farming, for example, now alternative protein production, plant-based or organic fertilization, than on the actual technology related to agriculture, such as, for example, in our case, sensorization and artificial intelligence. I think that in this sense, there are very residual investment and very limited investment volumes about the volume of the funds, for example.
Mm-hmm. Giovanni, would you agree? Would you add something?
I do agree with Carlos. I mean, I think like maybe like, you know, one quick step back. When people usually talk about agtech, right, it is an incredibly heterogeneous type of sector. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it begs the question to why is often referred to as a sector. Already, like, you know, if you start segmenting, you know, farm tech from food tech, you are in two completely different worlds. So that maybe, like, you know, is the first premise. If we still want to go ahead with this, you know, all in one basket approach, absolutely, I would totally agree with Carlos. I think, like, you know, we've seen that alt proteins at the food tech levels, and don't know where to put the vertical farming, but yes, let's say, like, you know, at the farm tech level is by far the sectors which have attracted, you know, the biggest interest and capital. And of course, we all also know that you know, at the end of the day, there is always a little bit of a crowd approach, right? Investors, right? So, like, you know, then when 1 hectare picks up and gets heated up, then, like, you know, there is massive interest in that one there. So those two sectors, I guess, have received a lot. I also sympathize, like, you know, with your statement about regenerative farming. But then again, like, you know, I would also be a little bit cautious to a certain extent. And what is regenerative farming? You know, there is a ton of technologies that can potentially apply and serve to that purpose there. Now the question is, like, you know, how each startup contributes with its product, like, you know, to achieving this goal.
Yes, certainly there are differences. Okay, and okay, again, Carl, so would you say, what kind of funding your company has received so far from public and private sources?
Well, in our case, we have been self-financing from our friends and or saving money, and some regional or local funds here in Navarra. We are located in Navarra, and the R&D Department of Government of Navarra have contests every year for the most promising startups or SMEs, and we participate and we take it some funds and form the acceleration program. But the acceleration is very good at the time to give you some information over your teams, but not at the time to get funds. But in our case, is self-financing, funds from friends and family, and then funds from local and regional programs for R&D.
Okay, so you first started with public funds.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is that? Would you make some differences? Why public funds are maybe the better option to start with, and not to go directly to private investors?
Private investors are so far from us because the private investors expect to find an SME. We have a big track record about the turnover with 3 or 5 million euros, for example. And they are scared to put money or to put funds and in a startup that is investing in R&D, is developing a technology, and is planning to be in the market in the next 2 or 3 years, for example. The investors are afraid to the risk, to the management of risk, despite that the startups is dealing with the management of risk to try to be and to launch the product or the solution in the market. But the investors look for the startups that they are in the market with a turnover of 3 or 5 million euros, 2 or 3 years, taking data from the turnover, and is not the time, I think, from to meet the investors maybe in the future, in 1 year maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Giovanni, what about your company? What kind of funding have you received so far?
But we have received the, we're part of the ESMERA, which is another EU Horizon 2020 open call. And we really worked in that context in developing the building blocks, right, in order for a specific proof of concept. Then we expanded on that, and then we built it on those results, and really to go to the next level and develop the what we call the 3-row version of our system. That was already at a pretty advanced stage, and then in the context of the agROBOfood call, we were able basically to tap into the agROBOfood call, and in order to really get to the technology demonstrator level in 2021, which we want to, which was according to our plans, and basically in order to get us to the next level. So in summary, it's Horizon 2020 calls, and also last year we raised €500,000 in a private funding process.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you please describe your experiences now with the public funding and the procedures and how it goes? Because I guess that the process of fundraising with public agencies is more rigid. There are application forms that are really strict, and regulations, a lot of regulations. And on the side of the private fundings, there may be possibility to raise more funds. However, the turnover of the award is higher. So there are a lot of differences between public and private funds. So what are your experiences?
So first of all, I would say that for example, in the context of agROBOfood, I would totally subscribe to the statements that were made, the feedback. So we were extremely happy with it. It really helped us tremendously. I think there was support from the network. The entire program was run professionally and in a very sort of sparring partner way, right? So that was incredibly a good experience, I would say. If you really have to ask me what can be done, of course, everything can be improved. When we talk about public funding, there is a ton of the application process is obviously rather detailed, which is also on the other hand it forces you really to put down in great details and think through all the plans, and we were very up to this date, we're still basically following the agROBOfood projects, and we probably are going to expect to do it. So it's not all that is bad in terms of thingy. So I think that's actually also helpful. But of course, it comes down with some degree of obviously extra layer of work, at the annotated model grant agreement following, etc., which is obviously rather cumbersome. It's not something that everybody can follow easily, given its complexity and size. But overall, I would say that it's. I think that the Horizon 2020 open calls are doing a very good job. I mean, at the end of the day, if I have to look at the amount of R&D that takes place thanks to this call, right, in Europe, vis-a-vis what probably would be financed at the startup level or the small companies level, which did not have already cash flows, I think that's tremendous values for the European taxpayer at the end of the day. I mean, the way I see it personally is that ultimately, what startups do is distributed R&D. Right? It is not maybe in the context of a big corporation, but it is distributed R&D, which has got disadvantages, but it's also rather efficient from a capital allocation perspective, right? And it's a lot faster potentially. But then obviously, if you ask me to compare it to the private capital type of pools, I would basically maybe already made one comment. My perception is that Europe, basically, compared to the US, okay, it's still like, you know, needs a lot of catching up to do. I mean, the liquidity, I think that you see in the US in agROBOtics, for example, it's an order of magnitude, I would say, which has got, I think, also an interesting aspect to it, in the sense that the higher is the amount of liquidity, and the more specialized, to a certain extent, my perception is that the private sector is in the US, which basically means is that you do not have to explain into greater depth why agROBOtics has got tremendous potential. They know it, because by virtue of the fact of there being a ton of capital available, the capital needs to be specialized, and they need to understand in rather good depth, right? What are the problems? So I think that to this extent, probably I would say that Europe could step it up. And the question, of course, like, you know, at which level, right? I mean, at the VC level, and how to do it. But I'm happy to elaborate further if you want me to.
Thank you. Okay, so for now, I would like to hear Carl's opinion on this. So what would you say are the greatest benefits of EU funding schemes? And if you can compare public and private funds a little bit.
Well, we don't know very well about the financial schemes on the European outside of very general programs like H2020, for example, but I think it could be very convenient to be able to access a kind of portal where you are assigned a personal advisor, for example, to whom you can explain your project and what you need, and so that the advisor can make a roadmap or a strategy and explain to you the different sources of European public funds and how to access them. I think this could be very useful, because sometimes that the entrepreneurs were very focused in the development of technology. We are a freaky of our technology. We are not very specialized at time to find and to carve and to dig into under the stones and to find an investors. This is a great job and a great to understand the mentality of the investors, but time to read papers and papers about in internet about the H2020 different programs or different funds, and it's a lot of big effort and big work. If the entrepreneurs have money enough, I'm sure that I will be hire people to put time, effort, and specialized to looking for funds and public funds in this case, or from the VCs, for example, in the private investors.
Mm-hmm. And now you said that you have experience with national funding. So can you say something about the funding in Spain? How does it go? Would you say that any other funding in other countries, for example, Germany, is also advanced?
Spain, we have general funds for all the region in Spain for the country, and then the localized regional funds, public funds in each area in Spain. For example, in the case of Catalonia, or in the case, for example, in Navarra, are different, and both are from public funds, but from the rules, from the administration, but from papers, the rules are very different and are more easy or more complicated. But if I compare in the case of from agROBOfood it's very nice, very, very simple, very clear. The people is very professional. I'm very happy to be my experience in agROBOfood, because it's more simple than, for example, in the case here in local, in public funds, in regional, in Navarra, for example, comparing. But in this case, I think Spain is very complicated. And H2020, the program public funds, for example, the problem is a very competitive a time to apply one program and to try to look for funds to finance your R&D, for example. This is one, maybe it's the problem too. It's very, very competitive.
Yes, and also as we noticed that they're raising the bar for the quality of applications. So when you're applying for some funding in the previous period, your application was not, it doesn't have to be that good written, but now because there are a lot of competitors and a lot of applicants, you need to really be very well prepared, and your application must be almost perfect for you to be chosen for to get funding.
Because the startups are not very specialized into rating applications for different public funds or private investors. Even also, we contract consulting companies, for example, try to help us to writing the applications, and to try to help, for example, at time to explain your financial scheme, for example, to explain the numbers and to explaining why this is suitable for the program or not, or your technology. And it's complicated sometimes to try to apply by yourself, and we have to spend money with consultancy companies that try to help and to get success with at time to take funds.
Yes, I see. And Giovanni, how do you approach this? Did you have some experience previously when you started applying for fundings, or do you also have some external help?
No, we did it all in-house for both open calls. So let me basically, it's not just direct H2020, but in both cases of open calls, we did it directly ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you approached also private investors. So how do you usually find additional investment? Do you go through personal contacts, or when you're looking for open calls, or are you just typing on the internet something that you're looking for?
No, I mean, like it obviously, like, there is a broad range of investors, right? If you're talking about private investors or business angels, as opposed to, like, VCs, there's different channels, obviously, to approach them. Actually, like, the investment that we closed last year, it was an investment that was a sort of branch of an investment that in the end did not go through in the just, like, a few months beforehand. And that was actually, like, in the context of a with the corporate venture capital arm. And this basically, like, did not go ahead. And then the investors that were on that funding round said, we're happy to basically, like, carry on and go through.
Mm-hmm. And how do you usually approach VCs, for example?
VCs, we have approached them, especially in the context of specialized fairs or events that happens basically, like, throughout Europe, and that basically it was the prime contact channel, I would say. There are several events, some of them, for example, like, taking place in Vakakinen and many others, and usually, like, those type of events tends to have, many of the participants in it.
Okay, now I would just address to all the participants now, if they're following. So if they have ever approached a venture capitalist firm, just to go to the second question and to give us feedback. So what kind of, how do they approach venture capitalists? So usually the venture capitalists, because they receive a lot of pitch decks, it is good to have a trusted contact through which you can contact them, because in a lot of cases, they're even not reading all the pitch decks. Okay, through LinkedIn also. Okay, there's one that never contacted VC. Cars, have you ever contacted venture capitalists?
Well, in our case, to being subscribed some newsletters from some funds or some private investors or any other portals using, for example, LinkedIn, having hired in this case, as I told you, hired a consultancy specialized in the search for public and private funds, for example, and then personal contacts from trust people that I know that in the entrepreneurs ecosystem, attending conferences specific to the sector in which we develop our activity, in our case, technology and robotics, for example.
And we also, I agree with you that that is a good approach. We are also following these conferences, which might be good for matchmaking events and so on. And we have a dedicated funding opportunity section in our agROBOfood newsletter. So you can follow it and subscribe to this newsletter and find out about the current open calls and these events that might be beneficial for all startups and SMEs to show up and to maybe introduce themselves to some investors. Now, I would like to ask Giovanni again if he can describe a little bit what are the key aspects that he had in mind when he was pitching to investors. So why do some SMEs get funding and the others not? How do you prepare the pitch deck and so on?
And yeah, we don't have sufficient time, maybe.
Okay, just the key things.
Look, at the end of the day, like, investors always trying to understand a few key points, right? What it is really like, the usual, the problem, right? What are you trying to solve? Why your solution is effectively like, a good solution? How much have you tested the solution? Where on the R&D as opposed to proof of market point are you? Team, fundamental, right? Do you already have the in-house capabilities, or like, there are major gaps in your teams that makes it difficult? How big is the opportunity, right? At the end of the day, like, it is also a matter of assessing and digesting, and that aspect. So and of course, like, is vis-a-vis like, the competition, where do you flare, both in terms of like, core competencies and development stage, right, and funding. So there's a raft of elements, I would say, that come into the picture.
Mm-hmm. And Carl, so what would you add here?
I agree with him that, taking in consideration that every investor is different and has its own ways to, but in general sense, you have to have a set of different documents as well prepared as possible to explain to the investor in a short way what we do and what we need to get to where. Investors have very little time and they have not very accessible. Also, in the end, it looks like a competition with another startups and with another projects, to get their attention from other projects and get them to stay connected to us. But I don't think there is a pattern or key aspects. As in my case, I have seen investors with very different profiles at what works for some doesn't work for others projects, for example, and many times you feel disoriented and somewhat frustrated. I think that choosing the most appropriate investor for the need or the moment of your project or your startup is going through could be a good way to segment or and sharpen the aim when approaching an investor. But in many cases, access to information is very, very limited, and I think it's a hard work to do. And
okay, but every time you are participating, you're trying to highlight some of your strengths. So you're always presenting your vision and some your strengths of your company. So maybe that is the robotic solution that you're developing. Maybe it is the cutting edge solution, or it is the team that you have maybe. So what are usually the key things that you want to highlight, that you're better, to prove that you're better than others, and to prove that you're capable of developing the solution that you're for which you're trying to receive funding?
For example, to showing your results, about making some tests about the laboratory, for example, in preliminary stages, or when you are testing in the field, you're showing your videos, for example. But in your case, we are writing patents, and sometimes at time to show some results is very sensitive things for investors, or for it's not the same case for private funds or public funds, for example. But some investors are not very professional at time to, when you are showing some results, at time to sign an NDA, and it's very difficult at this time.
Mm-hmm. I understand. And if you got rejected, do you receive some comments and feedback from venture capitalists? Something that you can use to improve your approach the next time, or do they just let you know that you're rejected and that's it?
Yeah, when you are in front of a very professional investor, you keep receiving answers, or the more questions about the relation, for example. But when you are in front of a non very professional investor, it's difficult to follow up, and it's not interesting to follow the relation. Maybe it's better to put your effort in another possible investors in future, and not to keeping the relation with not professional investors, for example.
Okay, I think it's useful to receive any kind of feedback in the process, because you're always learning. So how to fine tune your strategy. And maybe it's a good idea to be in contact with other funders, with other business owners who already received funding from same or similar investors, so you can pitch to them and practice, so they can maybe hear and tell you what to pay attention to, or what to avoid when you're presenting, or something like that. So do you agree, Giovanni? So how did you prepare for your pitching event?
I think the ultimate proof, yeah, in the pudding, it's obviously you can't eat it, what with robotics, but what you can do is basically ask a user who's actually been using what your solution is and what's their feedback. And even better, if this user has actually paid for your solution, you cannot beat that, right? I mean, this is the ultimate kind of like, proof that investors look. Now, and this is like, was also like, for us very helpful, to agROBOfood in this respect, because obviously, like, it was the consortium had to be a consortium with the technology provider. In our case, it was us, and then some actual users. And the fact that basically, like, obviously we would continuously test and even have, like, this strong relationship with the user, and it's something that basically, like, investors can see, okay, like, you're not just in your workshop or wherever, like, doing your development. Actually, like, there is people that are actually using it, they're giving you feedback, and they're even interested to use it in the future. So that, I think, is probably, like, what I would definitely suggest. Be as close as possible to your end user, and really shape your product accordingly, and get paid. I mean, maybe to a certain extreme, right? I remember, like, having been asked by a hardware venture capitalist, how many paying customers do you have? And I don't mean, like, the first 100 customers, because those are the early adopters. Now, of course, like, if you take it negatively, you say, well, I mean, if I had more than 100 paying customers, I wouldn't really need venture capitalists. I would go to a bank, which is much cheaper in terms of cost of capital. But I think, like, the way, obviously, like, it was meant as a feedback, and it's a clear feedback, and it's something that we knew and we're aware of, the earlier you have proof of your clients, right, that your technology works, is used, and are happy to pay for, is the best proof that you can make to foreign investors.
Yes, but maybe if we are talking about startups, they can't have the market proof, in that stage. But maybe if they have a demonstrator or prototype, is it also sufficient to use it as a proof when approaching venture capitalists?
And this is, I think, that Tanya, this is what I was referring to beforehand, which is on the risk appetite, right, of the investor. And this is basically like, where you see the sort of maybe the stark differences, and potentially like, this ultimately a potential gap, right, between public funding to a certain extent and VC funding, right? There's this area effectively like, in between, which is probably a very hard area, right? I mean, that's when effectively like, you need to jump, and public funding, as you said, is not going to be able to push, right, like, commercialization in full. You need the private funding. But I would basically say that I think like, that our biggest comfort, right, is when we show the video of our product to a farmer and the farmer says, I've got 40 hectares, can you do it? Right. Yes. That's basically like, it's for us is the biggest, and because we know that there is a huge pain point, and this huge pain point basically just needs to be solved. Yeah, and sometimes like, it is difficult to find that like, that VC, as this like, in our experience, not all VCs, some do, some the more specialized do, have a real understanding of how big is this opportunity, because how big is this pain point. So there is, I think, like, maybe where Carlos is referring to, there is some bringing up the learning curve of investors, by like, educate them, like, why is this such a big problem, which at times can be obviously like, more difficult, right? Because they don't have sufficient time.
Yes, exactly. And now because there are different kinds of investors, do you usually go to generalist funds, or do you go to funds that have a special focus on agriculture or robotics, or is it enough to go to deep tech investors and to try to pitch them your idea from agtech perspective?
It's I think like, unfortunately, like, you have to try them all, Tanya. And of course you're gonna be facing the sort of the crude reality, right? When you're talking to an agricultural specialized fund, they know the problem, but maybe they need to be brought up the learning curve on the robotics side. If you specialize maybe like, on a hardware and robotics, they understand that they are not sure, like, what are the extra layer effectively of complication, just because they're not aware of it. In the agricultural sector, or what is the need, right, on the agricultural sector. So effectively, like, we don't have at the moment, right, a specialized agROBOtics fund. Doesn't exist, right?
You have an each investor that doesn't exist at the moment, or are not very visible in the market.
Exactly, absolutely, I totally agree. And I think that ultimately, I'm 100% convinced, because I can see it to a certain extent with our machines and our farmers that we're working with. I mean, that this is potentially an absolute doable game changer for achieving the farm to fork strategy. I mean, no question in my mind. I mean, this is it solves the labor issues. It solves the issues of reducing pesticides. So like, and hats off to the commission, like, they put money, where it's supposed to work. I would basically, the only thing I would maybe, if I could reach maybe one day to the commission, I would say, that's great, but then once you've done this R&D or initial, like, market entry phase, right? How can you basically support even further if there is, like, a structural, like, themes in the way the VC sector, for example, like, in Europe works? And I think like, the European Investment Fund has already like, done some work in effectively propping up liquidity by taking like, some specific stakes. My question is basically whether they can even do more, not just simply by providing liquidity in the agtech space, but because agROBOtics can be such a game changer specifically to agROBOtics technology. I think that would be really a major leverage of liquidity, which liquidity also means like, frankly, time to market, right? And how quickly basically those solutions can come to market on scale in achieving the targets of the policy, which is the farm to fork policy.
I absolutely agree. And this is something that I heard a lot of times in discussions when European Commission is presenting its plans for the future. This is something that they already have in mind, and they are trying really to improve to fill in this gap that exists, that will really be useful for all SMEs and with obtaining their financing. Carlos, would you add something here? So you agree with Giovanni's perspective?
I agree with all the comments that done Giovanni and his experience, and it's the same that I have found at the time that when we try to find the investor support for private or for public, for example, is the same experience, and sometimes it's frustrating, but because you are putting your effort, your all best of you, of your team, and hiring people to try to connect with investors or to make a presentation and to put money and trips but at the end sometimes it's very difficult to try to find the key player or the key investor or the investor that is a niche investor suitable for your solution that you are deploying, for example. No?
Okay, so now you're also in the process of finding and fine-tuning your strategies, but are there some concrete advices that you would give to SMEs, agtech SMEs in Spain? Let's say in Spain, because you're operating in this country. So is there any private investor that you would recommend that is really interested in this robotics in these sectors? And that are maybe more friendly and more approachable to other companies?
Well, here in Spain, for example, the investors now are starting to be more prepared and to be more professional, time to invest and to select the projects. And here in the investors in Spain, one of the problems is the amount of the ticket. The business angels, for example, the tickets are for 30K to 50K, for example, but in case in Europe that normally 200K is very, very useful. And when you go to America, 500K for a business angel is normal. But if you go to a private fund, for example, here in start from 1 million, and what happened when you need no 1 million, you need 300K. For example, you have not business angel, not private investor, but it's difficult that at time to match with business angel or not for a public for an investor or for a fund, for example, is difficult that to find a solution for the time that you need a budget for example to follow your process of R&D, for example. But here in Spain, it's a complicated profile of investor because the amount that are moving of the money. I think that in Europe, in German, for example, or France are more professional, more matching the needs of the startups or SMEs, for example.
Yes, and well, what I noticed from reading the articles, we can see that American investors are coming to Europe, which is good. Giovanni, have you ever applied in America for some funds?
No, but I actually started engaging some discussions with some specialized investors in the US, and I was, shocked, to be honest. After 15 minutes, the conversation was over, in the sense that I actually said, "Yep, I understand totally. Please pull me in your next funding round." So it was incredible, because basically, like, as I mentioned beforehand, you could really feel that they had a very deep understanding and knowledge. So so I think it's good. But I mean, look, what Carlos says, I think also it's also very extremely true. Europe, I think, at the moment, has got a very patchy work, like, in terms of how the private sector is funding. I think, like, in Italy, the sizes of the tickets for the private investors are pretty much like in line with the one in Spain. We have been extremely lucky with our private investors. They are serial entrepreneurs that have got a tremendous experience, and they've done a successful exit, which is basically the US model, right? I mean, that's basically how effectively, like, innovation drives further innovation. Okay, it gets recycled in a virtuous cycle. If you look, like, so I totally welcome, like, the interest, because I think also US investors have realized that in Europe there is a big market, there is highly specialized technical base, right? There is a rural requirements, there is the policies, right? So all the trends are aligned. So effectively, I think it's great that there is more competition on the funding side. And we also have started engaging some EU investors that are specialized and have signaled also high interest to be pulled into the next funding round. So, but again, after we prove the market. So going back to, like, the points of Carlos, which is something that we are planning to do this year anyway. So, like, this year we will have, like, our proof of concept in a market validated form. And it's a condition, in order to access the next level, I would say.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, and okay, we are approaching, we are going towards the end of the session, and I would like also to address another topic, which is investment landscape after COVID-19. So, Carlos, can you tell me, so how has the pandemic affected investments in agtech startups?
Well, I think it has COVID. It has raised many doubts, slowed down everything, lengthened or even suspended decision-making times. And in short, investors have been afraid about the uncertainty of the present and the future times, and that were so uncertain at the time. I think that the money, always say that the money is afraid about the uncertainty. And the pandemic of the COVID-19 was introduced very uncertainly in present and in the future. And when the investors see uncertain times, slow down or stop to looking for new projects or no investors, and then it's a catastrophic time for entrepreneurs and for SMEs, because we need to go ahead to keeping making our R&D process and to making the tests in the fields and demonstration, but we cannot stop. But when you depends on the from the investors, for example, you are stopping your activity, and it's a catastrophic time.
Mm-hmm. And Giovanni, do you have the same impression? I mean, you received the funding in the previous period, so it is great. It seems like you were not affected this much with the situation.
I said, like, we were incredibly lucky with our investor, right? I mean, they have, and we have basically the perspective, right? I mean, people still need to eat. So the macro trends effectively are not changed from this perspective. And in fact, the issues about labor sourcing to a certain extent were even potentially on the upside increased, right? As a result of COVID and that kind of, like, which created, although the German government ended up relaxing a lot of the restraints. So I think that if you've got an investor which is like, long-term, takes a long view, right? I mean, maybe with a bit experience, right? They will say, yeah, sure. I mean, the most shrewd investors are going to be the ones saying this is that, I'm happy to put money when there is uncertain times, because at the end of the day, like, that's going to be the best investment that they can make, probably. But in no doubt, I think, like, it is absolutely correct what Carlos is saying. The uncertainty drives liquidity. I have personally seen it in 2000, 2001. I saw it again in 2007, right? I mean, all of a sudden there is a complete drought, risk appetite collapses, and then all of a sudden things. I don't think that COVID has had such an impact in terms of risk appetite, my personal perspective. I wonder if, to a certain extent, like, these issues about, conflict in Ukraine will have that, or if in a certain way it will just, like, change a little bit the perspective again, and we might have an increased focus on agriculture again, as because, like, Ukraine is such a big producer, and then people are going to start actually looking, what's going to be the impact on the supply side? Is the cost base is going to increase? So the cost of production is going to increase, prices are going to increase, and the solution that best fits to replace this lost supply it may come into place. So
so we can see it as a new potential here.
No, I mean, look, I mean, I think, like, what comes from the Ukraine at the moment is only bad news, right? I mean, that's obviously, like, is the situation for everybody. But I think that the news flow, if anything, will put, like, some extra questions will be asked. Okay, energy, understood. This is, like, a major problem, but, Ukraine produces, like, what is it, nearly a quarter of the hectarage of sugar beets worldwide, right? It's got, like, a huge amount of grain things. What happens if that falls out? Are we doing the best with our land? Like, the entire agricultural, like, environment is I think will come more into the narratives, and that, I think, like, will put maybe, like, technology like ours in at the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. This is interesting perspective. So I see one question in the chat box. So it comes from George. It says, what was the most difficult stage of your journey so far? So bootstrapping, scaling up. Okay, Carlos, would you tell us? So.
Well, not really sure to.
So far, what was the most difficult stage for you? At the beginning, when you just started and you were running out of self-financing, and then looking for
for us, maybe now is the scaling up because it's much just with the COVID, with the crisis in Ukraine, and but you need to go ahead to try to fight and to find solutions. Is the life of the entrepreneurs, and you must to go keeping your path, and we are a fighter, and we always find a solution. Always, for example, just when Giovanni was talking about to making demonstration about your customers, for example, and when a customer, you have a happy customer is the best proof of concept that you have, for example, a time that to show your benefit or your product to an investor, for example. Now maybe we can scale up our solution and to make starting or accelerate the proofs and testing with real farmers, for example, and to making short demonstrations and to go with another strategic path to go to the investors, for example. And for us, in our case, is the scale up is the most complicated time to deal because it has been matching with after the COVID, with the Ukrainian situation, and well, but I'm sure that we will be a success.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm sure that you will. Okay, Giovanni, what would you say for your journey? So, what was the most difficult time?
It's a tricky one, because I think that what is clear is which is absolutely right. I mean, the path of entrepreneurs that are building something new is a very, on and off continuously. I'm not sure I'll be able to point to a specific most difficult part. I think there is always continuous challenges, right, that you face, whether it's on the technology side, now is on the commercialization side, it's on the financing side,
Yeah, every stage has its own difficulties. I agree. Okay, so another question. So Carlos mentioned serious investors. So we would assume that there are also non-serious ones. And we always focus on the investor sides and their needs, but we often neglect the needs of the company seeking funds. So this is a question for Carlos. So can you share with us any experiences with such investors? Which were the red flags that you noticed? Which were the signs that someone might see that show that the investor is not a good fit?
Well, maybe the serious, it was not the good word. I was trying to say professional investors. You know that in life you meet everything. Serious entrepreneurs, serious investors, it means professional investors or professional entrepreneurs. But mainly, I mean the professional investors in this case. I was referring a time that to put his time in you, to attending in a introduction of your company, to making a pitching, to giving you an answer when they promise to give you an answer, or to sing an NDA, for example, or to put the explanations or the people at your site at the time that you are in difficult at trouble to find investors. I think that this is my mean about the serious or professional investors. In my case, I was trying to explain this.
Okay, thank you. Let me see another question. This is one for Giovanni. So since you raised private capital, what was the hardest or maybe weirdest question that you received from a potential investor? Or alternatively, what was the hardest part of your solution that you needed to convince investors? For example, is the market fit, the technology, the financial projections, the team, so on?
I'll start with the easy part, which is the second one. Obviously, yes, we're able to raise the funds with private investors. So obviously, we managed to convince, obviously, on all of them, in the sense that is this required? We could point specifics, right? Why was this required, and provide evidence and the backup. The technology, again, similarly, financial projections, obviously you have to be able to explain all your assumptions, and how did you go around it. So I would basically say that I mean, I've got a catalog of best of weird questions from investors. I think once we were asked why aren't you removing the weeds by going 15 centimeters down into the soil? And I think that was and we never actually we were shocked by the question. We said because you don't need to, because that's what not farmers do. That's basically but I think it highlights, right, what I was mentioning beforehand, that an investor might be extremely savvy on the tech side, right? They understand totally your tech stack and what you're doing, but then they have this barrier, right, in understanding the ag side. And then, in that particular case, you see what farmers are doing, and they are not, digging for oil, right? Like, when they remove weeds, like, it's something that doesn't happen. But so that's basically was I would say was one of the top ones. Trying to get them across in a believable way, like, look, this is what happens, and this is the only thing, frankly, like, you can do when you receive, like, certain types of questions. Point them to the evidence.
Yeah, so this is exactly what you said. So first you need to explain them. So what is the challenge that you're addressing, and how, so they can understand your vision and what is your goal that you're trying to achieve, and not just to think tech-wise or ag-tech or in agricultural sense, but to incorporate these two things and segments, and then to think about your solution.
There's a follow-up questions on that. Based on your experience, what is an advice you will want to give to anyone seeking funding for his or her company? So first of all, I maybe tend to overdo it in terms of financial planning for myself or for ourselves. Obviously, like, trying to really, juggle and try to create as much optionality in the funding process, so that you're not kind of to the largest extent possible, right? Like, with your shoulders against the wall. I.e., like, you're running out of money, and then what shall we do? Shall we take any offer that comes, like, on the things? So that, I think, is the first thing. Really, like, trying to make a plan with, the fuel that you've got in your tank, and not find yourself in a position to having to take for sure anything that passed by. That's basically, like, would be the first one. The second one is, I would say, which is connected, it's funding. It's always like a dress, right, for a certain profile, body shape. So the funding always needs to match, right? Like, what it is your current state of the company, what it is just your development, right? I think that, when people think about funding with bank debt, and it's still, like, the company has an R&D stage, I would totally advise against that, right? I mean, if you don't have a product yet that is commercially, like, in the market, you have marginality, etc. I would not use that financial instrument. So try to find effectively match, the type of funding and the objectives of that funding vis-a-vis, like, what it is in your funding horizon, the plan of the company. Those two needs to be matched. Maybe the last one I would add is which is again, like, connected, which is the issue of optionality, in the sense that, sometimes basically, like, you have to be careful that certain funding alternatives today may or may not prejudice funding alternatives tomorrow. So this issue effectively of short-term gain, long-term pain, this is something also I would be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. Carlos, would you add something here? So what would you advise to someone who is seeking funding for his or her company?
Well, I think, first of all, the paper supports all plans and everything is feasible. By this, I mean that you should ask yourself whether or not you have a plan, and do you think is well defined, this plan? And secondly, you have to think that if you receive private funding, you will go to one speed much faster than if you receive, for example, public funds. You will go to another speed. This if you are ready to scale up very fast or not, or at the fast that the private investor will tell you, because when you receive or you are thinking to go to a private investor to put his money in your startup or your SME, you are selling the control of your company to a private investor. You are selling your shares, and this is the thing that you must pay to the investor. Right? You have to have your thinking very clear in your mind, and to put your strategy very clear in your paper, despite that all is feasible. And you must to be thinking in your mind that you want to be faster or not, and if you want to sell your shares, and you want to share your control of your company, and all these points, I think, are key points that you have your be clear in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And also, I've received some feedbacks from some other agROBOfood beneficiaries that they said that they probably, if you can do without external funding from private investors, you should try to go without it. So it depends now what you're developing, what kind of solution. If you need really a huge amounts of money for the development of your solution, that you need to go to them and to think about these things, about the shares and everything. But what are the other options? Do you have in mind any other options? So if you don't want to go that way, what else can you do besides going to public funds? Maybe to go to look for some accelerators that offer sufficient amount of money, if that's possible, and then you will also receive some coaching services.
Acceleration, for example, one of the problem is the amount of the ticket is very, very small. It's very good at the time that to give you services for your team about marketing, about financials, about maybe sometimes about technology. But at the time to put public funds from acceleration programs are a ticket very, very small, about 50K, 100K, and it's difficult to reach. And well, I think that the best strategy is to go in parallel at the same time that you are receiving public funds. For example, in this case, from agROBOfood, I think the agROBOfood is a very, very good program, because have the 360 degrees about packet services, about formation, about financial, about testing, about professionals that are thinking to try to help you to that your solution reach the market or reach the testing, and to go in parallel to looking for private investors, for example. And when the right time arrives to you, you will find in your path the right investor, because I think I'm sure that will match the best time for you.
Okay, thank you. We received another question. Okay, this can go to Giovanni. So what are the best ways to find private investors starting at technology readiness level 2? So this is a specific question. So
I think it's to be honest, like, TRL 2, I would say is probably grant money, I would say. Private investors, I would, unless like, you are really into, I found the way of making nuclear fusion, like, with 10 cents, is going to be very difficult, I think, like, with TRL 2 in agROBOtics to find private investors. Maybe I'm wrong, but like, that's my gut feeling. Or basically, like, you change market, you go to the US, as that's the alternative, where effectively, like, liquidity and risk appetite is higher.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they appreciate, American investors are looking more at the bigger picture, so maybe they will more be interested to hear your vision, even though you're still at the technology readiness level 2. Mm-hmm. Carlos, what do you think? What are the best ways to find?
Than Giovanni in this case, because I had three experiences few months ago to talking with 3 private investors in America, and my surprise is they're very focused on to do business and not to lose the time and not making a very long conversations. They are very straight to the taking conversation and to seeing a video demonstration and not losing the time, but they're putting money in the risk. They believe in these stages of tier 2, for example, they are investing in this time because they believe in the future. I believe in the good ideas. They are putting value in the ideas. Here in Europe, for example, the ideas, they believe in the and put only money in the demonstration and to look in his eyes and touching in them with his hands. But the Americans and maybe in Asia, in China sometimes that there are investors that put money in ideas or ideas of business or a solution integral to, for example.
Yes, I think that's because investors who are working in VCs, for example, in America, are usually former entrepreneurs. So that's why they have this mindset, more focused on the business side and the vision and ideas. And on the other hand, European investors are usually people who are coming from, they have a background in finances. So they are more focused on this other type of thinking where they're looking at your revenues and they're looking for a lot of reports and clear solutions. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, so far not. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. So to wrap up the discussion, Giovanni, would you like anything else to add now here? Finally, if we have anything that I didn't ask you, but you would like to add something useful for SMEs?
No, I would basically say, like, you know, if you haven't already applied for the second open call, I think that they should in agROBOfood, and I think let's keep on really, like, you know, being at the forefront of technology solution, advanced technology solutions. I think this is, like, you know, it's a very rewarding type of thing, and in the context of what we're doing, it's got the extra benefit of providing a better future, right? So, like, you know,
absolutely,
let's carry on.
Thank you. Carlos, something from your side for the final?
Oh, I think that's all. I think that taking doors about the contacts, about sometimes in LinkedIn, for example, in my case, if anybody in the room can contact me or want to contact me by LinkedIn, I can explain, for example, my opinions or my histories about this, or to share any contacts about my experience. For example, I think to share experience between the entrepreneurs, I think it's good to try to avoid the misunderstanding or the put of failure at your time, that you find an investor, or to lose your time, for example, or your effort, for example.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this recording will be available to everyone. Please check out our website to find more information about Innovation Experiment Second Open Call that is now open. You have 2 months to submit your application, so it will close in the end of May. Also follow us on social media. And that would be all from my side. You can contact me if you have any other questions. I would like to thank very much Giovanni and Carlos for being with us today. I think that this was very useful for everyone, for SMEs who had some entrepreneurs with fundraising, but also for the ones who haven't received any kinds of funds so far, but they're willing to try to contact some public or private investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you, Tatjana.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.